Welcome back to Tabletop Assault. I'm Ross, and today I'm going to continue my segments on analysing units from the Chaos Space Marine Codex. Now today I'm going to discuss Plague Marines. This is sort of the second round of talking about a dedicated god unit that is got a codex, affiliated with it, the Death Guard Codex, of course. But Plague Marines sometimes do go into sort of the field with other legions, and this can affect their rules and their roles slightly as well. Give them a wee bit of different utility. Their endurance certainly does make them a viable choice. So how this works is that I'm going to have a look at the unit itself, look at stat lines and what they do. Going to have a look at the weapons. I won't go into so much detail because wow, they have so many. And have a look at their special abilities as well. After that I will have a look at sort of loadouts and role suggestions I would go with them. I'll then talk about legion traits, because obviously they take a different legion trait if they're not Death Guards, then you get something a bit different. Then talk about psychic abilities that can help them, and of course stratagems. So yeah, with that, well, let's have a look at the Plague Marines. Plague Marines and their champion have a movement of 5, so they are slower to reflect their sort of slow mass side. I mean, we kind of expect that from Plague Marines, so a wee bit slower, only by an inch, so not bad when you compare it to other Chaos Space Marine units. Weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, kind of what you'd expect from a Marine force. Strength 4, but toughness 5. So that toughness 5 obviously is building into the resilience. Makes them, against small arms fire, a lot harder to bring down, and certainly even things like last cannons still can only win them on 3+ instead of 2+, so why you're firing a last cannon at a basic marine is beyond me, but it does mean that small arm fire is going to be a little bit more challenging to be used against them. They have 1 wound apiece. Would have dug, having 2 wounds apiece, but I think that might have been asking too much from a basic unit like Plague Marines. 1 attack apiece with 2 on the champion. That's kind of what you expect, though other dedicated units do have sort of more, but we'll speak about, spoke about one of them already, speak about another in the future. Leadership 7 with champion being 8, so kind of as brave as Marines usually are, and save 3+, which is what you'd expect from power armor. So certainly the big note there is the lower movement by an inch but higher toughness does make them quite more resilient due to small arm fire, which is kind of nice and sometimes really carried over from Plague Marines as a tradition. They've had this higher toughness value, so it's nice to see that it does remain within this edition. So yeah, they have as standard plague knife, bolt gun, blight grenades and crack grenades. Yeah, they don't have bolt pistol, which is interesting. Most sort of Marines do begin as a basic with a bolt pistol, but they don't. They've switched it out, I think, for their plague knife, which is kind of handy. Now, there is so many weapon options for Plague Marines. It's a huge part of their page is the amount of weapons that they do get. And it's very interesting they do get all these different sort of weapons, and I won't go into them in detail because I'll just be talking for ages. But the key ones that sort of stand out, and one that I'd probably say more than anything, is the Flail of Corruption. It's a really, really good addition of a melee weapon. It's almost criminal that it isn't on the champion. That if the champion could use it, it'd be fantastic. But that's the break sometimes. So the melee Flail Corruption is a melee weapon. +2 strength, bringing them to strength 6, which is wonderful. -2 AP, which is great. It's 2 damage per hit. So, per wound, so that's pretty good. But it's a plague weapon, which I'll go into a little bit later on, but essentially it's quite good. Make D3 hit rolls each time you attack with this weapon instead of only 1, so the potential of having 3 attacks. Excess damage from this weapon is not lost. Instead, keep allocating damage to another model in the target unit until either all the damage has been allocated or the target is destroyed. So correct me if I'm wrong on that one, that means a potential single Marine swinging this flail can do roughly 6 wounds or 6 damage that isn't lost, it just carries over. D3 attacks, so you can get 3 attacks, hitting on your 3s unless it's modifiers, hit at strength 6, and then you do get to reroll 1s because it's a plague weapon, and then any of that 2 damage per one just carries over till it kills something or until it's lost. So that's pretty darn good, and I think if you go down a melee sort of unit with Plague Marines, you're almost going to see the Flail of Corruption used quite a wee bit in compared to some of its other ones. I think it's in competition with the Great Plague Cleaver, which is essentially sort of like a power fist that does d6 damage. Yeah, can be nice, but when you've only got 1 attack, it's not so nice. So yeah, Flail of Corruption is the big sort of one there. Do I go into talking about all the weapon options? I won't. I'll more talk about sort of the loadout and suggestions of them, but more or less, have a look at the codex. There's plenty of actual options there I could talk about for ages. In terms of abilities for the unit themselves, they've got Death to the False Emperor, which obviously means if you hit an Imperium unit in combat and you get a 6 to hit, you can make an additional attack, a 6+, you can make an additional attack with that weapon. Really nice when fighting Imperium units, not so much against Xenos or other traitors, but still, if you are in combat, that can be quite nice. Vectors of Death and Disease, a Plague Marine equipped with 2 Plague Knives, a Plague Knife and a Bubonic Axe, or Mace of Contagion and a Bubonic Axe, has attack characteristics of 2 instead of 1. So if you're dual wielding, you do actually get dual wielding melee weapons of those types, you do actually get 2 attacks, which can add up pretty nice. As knives are quite cheap, that can work out to be pretty darn good. Disgustingly resilient, each time a model in the unit loses a wound, roll a d6. On a 5 or 6, the model does not lose that wound. This is a key feature of their sort of survivability. That means 1/3 of the wounds that you would suffer, you do actually ignore. The weakness to that is obviously, you know, wounds that have multiple damage, you've got to survive them all for it to really pay off. So, you know, high strength weapons that do multiple damage is a good way to clear Plague Marines, but small arms fire at toughness 5 with Disgusting Resilient is going to keep them in the game that bit longer. Plague Weapon, you can reroll wound rolls of 1 for this weapon. So they have ranged weapons there that do that. I'm looking at it's the Blight Launcher. The Blight Launcher, which is another fantastic weapon, by the way. I highly recommend that if you're going down the range route. That and plasma guns are fantastic, but that reroll 1 for wounds is pretty good. Works both in fight phase and shooting if you've got the Plague rule, so that makes them quite nice as well to get more reliable wounds. So yeah, that is the Plague Marines as they stand in the Codex. What I'm going to do is I'm going to begin by talking about some of the loadouts that they have that I would suggest works out best for them. So when looking at Plague Marines, it's interesting to think about whether to use them as small squads or in a bigger squad. The advantage of the small squad is a couple. Firstly, all the weapon options available to Plague Marines are not dependent on the unit size, so you can dedicate their role pretty well in just a small squad with lots of cool weapons. In other armies, sometimes you need to be over a certain size to get more weapons. These guys don't. They just can start out small and have all the weapons they want, and if they're bigger, not so much. So that's not ideal on that side. The other advantage of course, if you're a small squad, is you don't need to worry about morale as much. Sure, you may still lose some to morale. You know, these guys are no longer fearless, which is a real shame. But when you're a small squad, you're more likely to obviously be wiped out by just being shot to bits than you are going to be losing out on morale. So small squad works out quite well there. Lots of weapon options, you don't need to worry about morale as much. Large squads have advantage of stratagems becoming much more efficient, which can make a big difference. Also, big squads can be a really good shield and tough to move. Of course, you know, Plague Marines have a lot of survivability when it comes to small arms fire, and mortal wounds having the possibility to have a save against them. But still, bigger weapons, especially those doing multiple damage, will bring them down fairly easily. Still, that can be, you know, big guns focusing on the Plague Marines rather than some of the other units that don't have their endurance. However, your opponent just needs to focus them down enough, you know, bring down enough to get to that morale phase, and then if you've taken a 20-man squad and you've lost like over half of them to morale, you're going to lose, you know, quite a few of them to morale, which is obviously devastating. But say you want to, you know, put these guys in a prime position, I do have some plans for that later on, these guys can be a good shield that's hard to move. So having them in a big squad can be possible, and I do have a configuration for that. So what kind of configurations do I have? There are a few I do suggest, though I'm interested to hear about what you guys think, because I've read so many different configurations for Plague Marines, so I'm interested to hear other people's views as well. So first one is, of course, Plasma for days. 2 plasma guns in the unit and a third on the champion. Plasma is great, no question about it. Unleashing a volley of plasma will cause your opponent to suffer. Problem is, you need to get up close to really get the most out of this unit. So I would possibly throw 2 squads of these guys, 2 5-man squads of these guys in a Rhino and right downfield to get into that all important rapid fire range. This becomes a bit expensive, and it does, begin to use up elite slots because only Death Guard, if you take them as Death Guard, get to use them as troop choices. It may also be a good idea to have a Chaos Lord to allow rerolls of 1s in case those Plague Marines begin frying themselves, because obviously you're slain outright, you don't get to use Disgustingly Resilient to survive that slaying when you fry with this big plasma weapon in your hand. So you've got a real choice in that one, whether you want to stick sort of a lord, a Chaos Lord in the Rhino itself, which means you cannot take 2 units in itself. But I would personally take 2 units, and that gives you 6 plasma guns within a Rhino. Get upfield, try not to die, activate smoke, jump them out next turn, hopefully within rapid fire or super danger range, and drop a Chaos Lord with a jump pack down to go, hey guys, hit things, don't kill yourself. That's kind of how I would go if you're going down the plasma route. Next one is Taste the Blight. 2 Blight launchers on the unit and plasma gun on the champion. The Blight launcher is a pretty darn good weapon. Decent strength, I think it's strength 6. It's assault 2, 24-inch range, minus 2 AP and D3 damage. Good to deal with infantry and light vehicles, and then push some heavier ones as well because it does have D3 damage. Also gets to reroll 1s to wounds because it is of course a plague weapon. So that does give it some nice options there as well. The champion dealing extra damage with its plasma, also ideal as well. Next one I've got is Getting Close and Plague. 2 Plague Belchers, or Plague Spears if you prefer. 2 Flail of Corruptions, Bolt Pistol, Plague Sword or Power Fist on the champion. This is your up close and personal small unit of special weapons. The Flamer will help in close combat to deter charges coming at you. Though if you are going to be charged in combat, then they're probably going to wipe you because nothing wants to be hit by those Flails of Corruption. Certainly a deadly weapon in combat with its good strength, good damage, good AP and reroll 1s and damage carries over. So Flail of Corruption, if you do get charged, you want to make sure they survive and hit hard. This is pretty awesome, and it's a shame the champion for the Plague Marines has such an odd sort of weapons that it can use. If only it could have Flail of Corruption, having 2 attacks and then D3 attacks per attack it's got would make it pretty awesome. The difficulty on this one, and this is going to sound terrible by the way, is that I've not had a chance to play Plague Marines in 8th, or at least the new ones, and if you've seen any of our 7th edition battle reports, you'll know I'm a big Death Guard fan. I absolutely love them, but I'm working on it. So I don't have the personal experience to work out what the best use of this unit yet. I feel that you could probably drop the Flamers, if you don't want to go with them, and especially keep the Flails because they will do quite well. Still, overall, a small, quite damage dealing unit that, if it gets in a charge, it's going to do some good work there, and I'm excited to do it myself because I have a huge amount of Death Guard waiting to get painted up, and I've got a lot of Flail of Corruptions and various other toys to bring. So when I do get those Plague Marines ready to go, it's going to be fun. But I've not had the personal experience to see how it goes on this side yet. Love to hear your view on that one. But I do like that loadout where you are having 2 Flail of Corruptions. And if you want to add in some Flamers as well, go for it. Next one I've got is a bit of an unusual one. It's one I saw on an article recently and I thought, yeah, that might work as well. Getting Close and Plague Large Edition. Basically a big squad of 20 Plague Marines, all armed with various assortments of close combat goodness. 2 Flail of Corruption, 2 Mace of Corruption and Boric Axe, though I'm not 100% sold on the Mace of Corruption yet. And then assortment of Boric Axes, dual-wielding Plague Knives, etc. You know, basically the sort of combat assortments you can have with the Plague Marines. So this is a big unit that your opponent's going to have to deal with, and it's going to attract a fair amount of attention and firepower. So, you know, what you might want to do is use a certain Alpha Legion stratagem, getting close to your opponent, hunker down and cover just in case you do not get first turn. And not only will you attract a lot of firepower at you, but you may be able to wither quite a lot of it and still be quite a threat. Otherwise, getting close, you know, if you don't go down that stratagem route, may be very difficult for this unit, especially if you're going against a particularly fast army such as Elder, Dark Elder, Harlequins, who may just run circles around you and then you're just slowly going, hey guys, you know, I've got all these deadly Plague Marines, and they're like, you're not going to catch us. So it can be dangerous and certainly uses up a whole bunch of the field and very expensive in some units, but if used right, I imagine that might be quite a deadly unit. I'll give it a try at some point, but certainly morale is your worst enemy with this unit. But their survivability may mean they take in a lot of the hits that other units may not survive as much as them. So yeah, that's the sort of 4 loadouts I'd go down. Plasma, Blight, Close Combat Small and Close Combat Big. Well, there's so much choices in this unit. Some weapons I feel are not as good as others, that may not be as suitable. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you might use in terms of sort of the loadout you can for the Plague Marines. Keep in mind, this is Chaos Space Marines, not Death Guards. Important caveat that. I might at one point get to Death Guard, and I'll speak about them again in a bit more Death Guard goodness. So Legion traits. Let's speak about Legion traits that they can take when they're not actually Death Guards. Alpha Legion, hidden in plain sight. Your opponent must subtract 1 from hit rolls that target units with this trait if they're more than 12 inches away. As usual, a very useful trait to have, but like all general Marine units to have, they want to be in sort of mid-range to get the best out of their special weapons, or closer if they want to go into combat. Still, if you're float slogging with these guys, it just adds a lot more survivability. Say you're taking them as small units with blight launchers, then yeah, you can stay further away and still pepper shots out with those deadly blight launchers and get the advantage of the -1 to hit. So that one can work quite well for them as well. Plus there's a stratagem with them that is quite good as well. And Warriors, Siege Lords. Enemy units attacked by this unit with this trait do not gain the bonus to their saving throw and cover. In addition, you can reroll failed wound rolls for units with this trait that target a building. I never speak about the building one because I don't play many buildings in 8th edition so far, but we'll speak about the cover side. Cover is not that useful in this edition, however that does not mean it's not useful. Certain armies and units still favour them. I'm thinking of like Devastators, Dark Reapers, Admech when they Shroud Slam. Ignoring the cover can be a huge advantage, especially if you're using Plasma or Blight Launchers. Though Dark Reapers, I believe, have many more tricks to actually just avoid you than hiding in cover. Thinking of like slight blockers, I think they've got stratagems as well, which makes them a right old pain. But still, being able to use those really deadly weapons and then ignore the cover does make it quite good as well. Night Lords, Terror Tactics. Models and enemy units must subtract 1 from their leadership characteristics for each unit with this trait that is within 6 inches of theirs, to a maximum of -3. So this is one that I've never really recommended before. After all, -1 morale, and having to get very close to get the best of it is not that great. However, add on Icon of Despair, which is an upgrade option for the Plague Marines, you're -2 leadership within that sort of bubble, which makes things a little bit more reliable. Generally, morale is not the best way to sort of taking out units. A lot of people have figured out ways to sort of avoid it as much as possible, but still it makes a much more interesting way to fear bomb enemies when you are causing -2 to leadership within 6 inches. So there is that possibility as well. I mean, you just need to have the single guy holding up his icon within 6 inches and it's -2 to everyone nearby, and that can work quite well. Psychic abilities. So psychic abilities I think are not going to favour the Plague Marines as much as other units in this codex. I think there are chances where they may be the best target, especially for one of the spells that makes them quite good, but I think it may be a challenge depending on how your force is kitted out. Either way, Prescience, Warp Charge 7. If manifested, select a Heretic Stash unit within 18 inches of the Psyker. You can add 1 to hit rolls for that unit until the start of the next Psychic phase. +1 to with these guys is generally pretty good. It's going to make your dangerous plasma guns and blight launchers become that much more reliable. You won't fry yourself if that's the case. And it's going to make your Flail of Corruption swings reliable as well, and hopefully cause quite a bit of damage. Generally not bad. Need to see what the most dangerous unit you have on the field and if it is the most worthy target for Prescience, because it is fantastic. But there is times where the Plague Marines may be of some use to take this as well. Warp Time, Warp Charge 6, pick a Heretic Stash unit within 3 inches of the Psyker. This unit can immediately move as if it was the movement phase. A unit can only benefit from this once per Psychic phase. Yeah, so Plague Marines are very slightly slower units than others, so that extra movement is pretty useful. Can help you get within rapid fire range, or more importantly if you're going down the route of combat, it'll get you there. Warp Time is fantastic abilities and there's a lot of competition to see who can do it best. At some points Warp Time may help Plague Marines quite a wee bit, but generally I'm going to prefer targeting, I don't know, a Hellbrute or, you know, a Demon Prince and just throw that down my enemy's throat because they get massive amounts more of movement, and generally if they get in combat can start tearing shreds apart. Sometimes Plague Marines might be good for that one, but there's a lot of competition for it, same as Prescience. Last one I think is quite good is Miasma of Pestilence. Warp Charge 6, Mark of Nurgle only. Select a visible Nurgle Heretic Stash unit within 18 inches of the Psyker. Until the start of your next Psychic phase, your opponent must subtract 1 from hit rolls that target this unit. So this, along with the Alpha Legion trait, can make, you know, your Plague Marine's natural endurance become incredibly frustrating. 20-man squad is going to grab some attention, say they're way back down the field, your opponent's like, I really need to deal with them at some point. -2 to hit is going to be very, very frustrating, because you can be Alpha Legion, Nurgle unit, activate that, -2 to hit, that's going to be pretty good. So yeah, that Miasma of Pestilence along with our Toughness 5, Disgustingly Resilient, minuses to hit, you're not going to shift them, you know, they're going to either sit in points, move forward, and generally harass your opponent quite significantly. Stratagem recommendations. Let's begin with some of the obvious ones. Veterans of the Long War. Cost 1 command point. Use the stratagem when a Heretic Stash infantry or biker unit is selected to attack in the shooting or fight phase, excluding renegade chapters. You can add 1 to wound rolls for this unit until the end of the phase. When I get to vehicles, I promise I will stop going on about this. So depending on how your squad is kitted out, this could be really useful in the shooting or fight phase. Generally, if you're a small squad, this may not warrant being used. Having this unless you've got things like plasma and you're targeting maybe Toughness 5 or more, or blight launchers, and you know, they may be quite useful as well. Or if you're in combat, then you know you're going to want to use all your big filled combat weapons to get that extra +1 to wound. Keep in mind you have access to a lot of plague weapons, so you know, allowing to reroll ones, add in this +1 to wound, you know, and your wound rolls become very, very, very reliable. This stratagem really does work well en masse, so obviously a bigger unit is more reliable for it. Again, it's one of my favourite stratagems. You know, you're going to have units that really want to use this one quite well, so you will see that Plague Marines will have benefit from it. But it's so useful, there's going to be so much competition. Forward operations, Alpha Legion only. 1 command point. Yeah, I've spoke about this in loads, it's really handy, I'm not going to go into huge detail, but this is the stratagem where you get to sneak in with your, you know, plasma squad, light people up. However, I find it might be better to take your big man, 20-man squad of Plague Marines and hunker down some, sneak in close, ideal in cover, create a very frustrating unit straight in your opponent's face that has to be dealt with. And then slowly they'll move towards your opponent's lines. Generally, when someone uses this type of stratagem, to get in close to your opponent's going to have to put a lot of resources to get rid of them, because if they don't deal with them, then that unit's obviously got a plan to hurt your opponent when they're that close. This unit can take hits better than others, so obviously it becomes prime target with this stratagem to be dealt with, but yet you go forward and you're probably going to survive a lot more than others. So it can be very handy to have as a big sort of distraction endurance unit right in your opponent's lines. Last but not least, I'm going to say Let the Galaxy Burn Black Legion stratagem, 1 command point. Use a stratagem when a Black Legion infantry or biker unit is selected to attack in the shooting or fight phase. You can reroll all hit rolls of one for that unit until the end of the phase. If the unit is a Chaos Space Marine squad, you can reroll all failed hit rolls for it instead. Great stratagem, shame it is Black Legion only, I think I said that every time. Being able to reroll your plasma shots or make your blight launcher shots more reliable, or your close combat attacks more reliable is so good. With plague weapons, this could mean that you reroll 1s to hit, and you reroll 1s to wound, add in veterans, and this can make quite a deadly unit. You've just got to be Black Legion to use it, which Black Legion, is quite good. You get Abaddon, you also get veteran buffs as well in certain places, but generally the Legion trait is not one that I rate highly, but that stratagem I really do. So that's it for Plague Marines. If I was to say anything about Plague Marines, I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of Death Guard, but I think in this current game now is that we see that sometimes it's better to have units that hit incredibly hard than ones that can endure pretty darn well. And so, depending on cost effectiveness as well. I think there is a reason why Plague Marines, and I could be wrong in this, since their index release have had 2 rounds of point reductions. I think they had point reduction between the index and the codex release, and I think, I could be wrong in this, they had a further point reduction in chapter approved, which shows that, obviously Death Guard were the big sort of release for them, that they want to sort of go, these guys are more useful, and being an endurance unit in this sort of meta where things can hurt so hard is maybe a little bit overrated. So that's a bit of a shame and a bit of a sad note to end on for someone who is a Death Guard fan. Yeah, they do have a whole bunch of toys, but do they hit hard enough to use them? Is a big question on that side as well. Cool new units that have got to be used. I've seen some awesome paint schemes for them, loads of options, and they can endure quite well. So I do see a place for them in the Chaos Space Marines, but with so many other sort of cult, dedicated god units, it can be very difficult to use them, especially when you've got competition from Berserkers, and for our next one, Noise Marines, which will be very interesting to discuss. So thanks again guys for watching. I am very intrigued to hear your thoughts on Plague Marines, considering I'm such a big fan. I'd love to hear your thoughts on them, and I'm looking forward to actually fielding my Death Guard army in the future when we finally get around to paint them. So yeah, thanks again. Please comment, share, like and subscribe. Check us out on social media and Patreon for various other news that we do throw out as well. And we'll see you on another Tabletop Assault Battle Report.